Okay, it's lovely to be here. Hi again. I'm Abhijit from Project DEFY. I stay in India. Currently, I'm visiting my parents, so I'm in Visakhapatnam instead of Bangalore, where I usually stay. Um, Also, it's a little bit of a pity that I could not do this session from a Nook, which would have been really amazing to show you guys. But maybe that's for another time. Yeah, I guess. Um, Firstly, of course, thank you for making me part of this wonderful group, for selecting DeFi, even though it is as young as it is, into a group of really cool projects and really cool educational initiatives from around the world. It is really humbling. Um, and I will take this opportunity a little bit to talk about DeFi. And in some sense, I've always felt that it, it works best in explaining what DeFi does if I just go ahead and tell the story of how it was started. And um, I think I would like to do that. So I'll speak for a little bit, talk about the story of DeFi, or how we started, and at any point of time, if you have any questions or anything you want to ask, just put a message, or just write a comment. It's already a little bit weird that this is a monologue, and I can't see anybody's faces, but please, yeah, feel free to just interrupt me all the time. I actually like that. Yeah. So DeFi, or the concept of Nooks was started about 4 years ago. Um, the I had moved to Bangalore for a job, my first and literally the only job that I ever did after college. I was 22 then, and this is 2013. And just being through school and college and then eventually ending up in a job that I did not like so much, I sort of realized that there's something going wrong with our education systems, and it just felt like a huge waste of time spending those 4 years and lots of money in college. And I had somehow started understanding that there are better ways of learning, better educational institutes and places. I had a mentor from MIT, and suddenly this whole world opened up. That yeah, people learn in a different way in different places. There are actually good places of learning, and we were just unlucky to go through bad ones. And the problem is that it is not just a few of us who are unlucky to go through bad education, it's actually the majority of us. And very few are lucky to go through great education. So, in 6 months of starting my job, I quit, and I was absolutely terribly bored, and I was scared of what I, I might become if I stayed longer. And I just ended up leaving the job. I had taken up a bunch of projects with this mentor of mine, and I was already doing them. And I decided that I'll move out of the city as well, because the city of Bangalore is full of people going to corporates and going for regular jobs, and all of my friends as well. And it was just very hard to get away from it if you would if you would not leave the city. So I did move, and I moved to a little village called Banjarapalya on the outskirts of Bangalore, with absolutely no plan or money in with me. All I knew was I was just going to stay in this village. There was another organization working there, and they offered me free food and stay, and I offered to help them a little bit. And that's it. Just moved, packed up my bags and moved in 2014 to this village, very tiny one, literally just a street, and about 300, 400 people in the village. And the first thing, almost within about 2 weeks, I noticed was that nobody had computers or smartphones, and not only that they'd never touched any of these. And this was a bit interesting, because Bangalore is considered this IT hub of the country, and everything is about software and computers. And then 15 kilometers away, this village has absolutely no access to computers or internet or smartphones, or the whole digital life that we live in. And in some way, that 15 kilometers was less a distance in space, but a far larger distance in time. It was almost 15 years behind in terms of access. Although that was okay. It was something I noticed, and I sort of moved on from there. I had found out some of the kids told me that some laptops were donated to to the local school, but the headmaster ended up selling them and just pocketing all the money, so the kids never got a chance to actually use them. But what was really interesting was I made a routine of sitting at the local tea shop, the only one that was there in the village, and I would just have my tea at 4 o'clock in the evening and play Temple Run on my phone. And these kids would get out of school almost at the same time, and they'd be waiting for their buses and for neighboring villages and all that. And they started noticing my phone, and they started lining up behind my back to see what I'm doing. And just a bunch of 5 or 6 kids who would just stand behind my back every day at 4 o'clock watching me play Temple Run on my phone. And they did that for about 1 or 2 weeks, until one day one of the kids put his hand forward. He did not say anything to me, and we could not talk to each other anyway because they spoke Kannada and I speak only Hindi and English. So there was no way for us to communicate. So it was just this hand coming forward, and it was clear that he wanted the phone. So I put the phone in this kid's hand, and suddenly the kid is surrounded by all these other kids, and the phone disappears for about 15 minutes until I get nervous and I try to peek into the circle to see what's happening. And these kids are playing Temple Run like pros, as if they were born to play Temple Run. And this was really interesting, and it confused me a little that how is this possible? These kids are touching the smartphone for the first time, and they're playing Temple Run by just observing for a week. I thought, well, maybe that's somebody might have been taught by some uncle who lives in a city or whatever. So I thought, okay, let's put together an experiment. I had a room and there was internet connection, and I borrowed a few laptops from my friends, and I told the kids that, hey, you like playing on this small screen? Would you like to play on a bigger one? And of course, the kids couldn't say no, and all these 10 to 14-year-old children, they walked in, and all I did was, I had kept the laptops one after the other, arranged along the tables, and I turned my back to them, and I started playing games on my laptop without saying a word. And the kids are making a lot of noise, they're running behind me, and they're trying to ask me questions in their language, but of course, none of that, I just wouldn't answer anything, I wouldn't say anything. And so, there was 3 hours of chaos, after which things became a little bit quiet. And when things become quiet like that, you get a little bit nervous, and you feel, okay, maybe the laptops are snapped and broken into 2, and the kids ran away or something. And I turned my back again to see what they're doing. These kids are nicely sitting 2 on each laptop and playing everything from car racing to Barbie, Dexter, boxing, all sorts of things. And the funny thing is that these are not the games on the laptop. They're actually on a browser playing games on the internet. So 3 hours is what it took for them to somehow manage to use the keyboard, use the computer, find themselves a game on the internet and play them, and while all of this is completely in English. And this was a very interesting point, because so far I had been told that digital learning and all of this is great, but it will never reach the villages because you need to know computers, you need to know English, and blah blah blah. And here are these kids who just were given computers, and in 3 hours they managed to use it, and they managed to do what they wanted to do with it. And at this point I was, okay, this is also great, but let's see if we can do more, and then just play games on computers. So while we never stopped the games, and we still don't, we started going onto YouTube and finding DIY tutorials, just things to make whatever the kids liked, you know, a little ball throwing machine or a little toothbrush robot or whatever they liked and they wanted to make, we just go ahead and make them. Now remember, we had no money. We had a bunch of tools that I owned, which ranged from a hammer, hacksaw, screwdriver, to one or two Arduinos and stuff like that. Now, but we had no materials at all. So we would find these materials actually lying in the trash. The village had a habit of throwing away a lot of things, and they would just throw it in the next to the street. So we would go there, pick up things that were useful for making these projects, and just go ahead and make them. And a few months went by. The space started having more and more kids, and a lot of collected trash that was probably worth a few hundred or few $1,000s. And it started expanding so much that the kids who were absolutely in love with it, they started telling other people, and their elder brothers and sisters and uncles and aunties and grandparents, and suddenly we had about 60-70 people coming to the space, and we had absolutely no idea what to do with it. At least I didn't, and because now you can't do one project with 70 people with one hammer, one hacksaw, and one screwdriver. So the kids found a way. They broke down into smaller groups, and they just went ahead and did the same thing that I was doing with them. These groups of people would come, pick up a project, do it, and go back. And it started becoming so interesting and so random that sometimes I would just be sleeping, and a group would come, build a project, and go back. Anything that they really wanted to do. And this was great. This almost felt... what did adults in the... Yeah, well, we also had adults come to the space, and they came almost with no clue. They were just told that, yeah, it's great. It's kind of like a computer learning center, but it's not a computer learning center. So adults were curious. And when we started introducing the internet, the first things that they wanted to do was learn typing, learn English, that sort of a thing. But then we introduced projects, and they started making stuff with the kids together. And yeah, so they had all sorts of imaginations about the space, and there was no real definition for it. And it continues to be that even today, the space does not have one definition. Each person has their own definition of what the space is to them. And so when you go there and you ask, what is this? And they say, well, this is whatever they feel about it. For some, it is still a computer learning center. For some, it's a tailoring center. For some, it's something else. Very recently, I've heard it's a makeup center as well. so whatever they feel is the right definition for them. So yeah, and once all these people started coming, and they were sort of on their own tracks, groups of people making projects, I thought, okay, it seems like I'm not really required here, that I'm basically just there, but I'm kind of useless, like a piece of furniture, and maybe it's actually running without any help from me. And so I thought I'll do my final little experiment, final test. And I told the kids and these few adults that were coming, I told them that, hey, in 3 days, I'm going to leave. I will no longer be in this place, and I'm leaving permanently. So all these laptops and tools and whatever things are there are all yours and of the village. Just use them, continue doing what you're doing. I'll pay for the electricity and rent, but that's all we can do. And I did. I left the village at the end of 2014, about 9 months from starting the space, and I went traveling around India. And 3 months later, I came back to see what has happened here and what's up with the village, with absolutely, let's say, not very high expectations. My thinking was that people would have disappeared by now, and the laptops would either be missing or broken, and the tools would be missing definitely. But when I came back, the most amazing thing was that there were more people than when I left. The laptops actually broke down, and they fixed it. There were more tools than before, which means that these tools we didn't even buy. So the community was actually putting things into the space as opposed to taking it out. And the most amazing thing was that the people who were new, who joined sort of the space after I left, they had no idea who I was. They didn't need to know me, and they have completely owned the space. And this was something amazing. This was sort of my own personal metric of success, that they forgot who started the space, and the space completely belonged to them. And that's where we thought, okay, we've hit something. This is something really cool. This could potentially reach a lot of people, especially people with less resources in communities that are facing marginalization or difficulties. And we went on to try these spaces. We started calling these spaces nooks, N-O-O-K, taking inspiration from the word nukkad. Nukkad is a Hindi word for a little tea shop in the village, where in the evening people just gather after work and they gossip, they chat, they sort of express themselves. And we felt that this is also kind of that kind of a space. There's no real definition for it. People gather, they do things together, and they freely express. They don't. They're not restricted to one kind of a behavior. They actually own this space together. And we started Project DEFY as sort of an organizational structure, an idea to support this concept, and to help more and more communities create their own nooks. And we were very clear that we didn't want to create centers. We didn't want to create, franchisees or centers of DEFY in different communities. We actually wanted to work with the communities to create a nook the way they want to have it, so that they completely own it. And that's what we did. We have so far created 7 nooks around India and in Uganda. And yeah, all of these nooks are basically created by the communities with a little bit of nudge from us and a little help from us. Which brings me to Pukhraj's question, just who can start a nook? Is it possible for the idea of the nook to be taken in rural or underserved regions outside of India? What steps do you suggest for the same? Well, who can start a nook? Literally anybody. Groups of people, organizations, government bodies, local panchayats and local governments. Literally anybody who really wants to start a nook in a community that they are really attached with can do that. And we, as an organization, our primary goal is to help them to establish it. So yes, it can be taken to rural and under-resourced communities outside of India. In Uganda, actually, the nook was created in a refugee camp in Nakivale, and it was created with refugees, and it is completely run by refugees. And the process is kind of the same. Every nook needs a sort of an amount of money to start. We generally recommend that you raise enough funds so that the nook can be established and can be run for a period of 1 year. It's really low cost. The operations don't cost more than $500 a month, and you can support the learning of 50 to 100 people with less than $500, where they are completely designing their own education. So the process is fairly the same. You raise the funds, and then we work together for a period of about 8 months to create the nook and take it to a point where it will not need DEFY. And hopefully it will not even need the people who invited us. And that is sort of how it works. We go through a long process of creating a proposal together, and figuring out how and when we will time it, who will be the people on the ground from the community who we will work with, and what this sort of process will look like. There's about 3 phases, which includes engagement, which is trying to understand the community through the community. Then about a month or 45 days on the ground, which we call induction, where we go there and get the space started and get a very intense routine started with the community, where they come and start engaging in self-learning and also start managing the space. And then after 45 days we disappear. But we continue to be in touch for about 5 months on phone and Skype. And after those 5 months, where we help the community tackle any challenges that they face while running the nuke, we back off, and we don't maintain a very constant contact with the community, but of course we are always available to ask questions and to ask for help. Yeah, how did you decide on Uganda? Very interesting story. Again, it is quite by chance. Somebody shared a video of our first nuke on the timeline of the founder of an organization called Social Innovation Academy in Uganda, and he liked the idea and he wanted to work in the refugee community. They had some fellows who were learning entrepreneurship from the refugee community in Nakivale. So it was basically, well, at that time this was still going through test runs. So he basically bought some flight tickets, and we went in there, stayed for about 10 days. They had already constructed the nuke, which was their first project. They actually built it with plastic bottles, which was really, really amazing. And we had about 11 days to get it started, and it just happened. Yeah, there's no real explanation for it. It was just lucky. What advice would you give to someone hoping to set up a nuke? My advice is always sort of the same, that it's great to have your own expectations of how a nuke will look like and what it will do, but don't overburden your expectations too much, and don't expect it to happen in the exact same way. Even we don't do that. We have seen about 7 nukes so far, and they all look very different. And even we try as much as possible to not go with our own biases of what the outcome will be. We just go with some principles, some objectives of how we will help the community to think about the idea of self-learning, how we will help them, for example, to create their own rules, to manage their own the finances of the nuke, everything. Like, these are just objectives, and then on the ground, how we actually make it happen completely depends on how people are responding. So every day the sessions are completely customized to the way people respond to it, and then of course we have to disappear. That is really important. So we have to let go, and if somebody wants to create a nuke, that is the hardest part, that you have to let go and let people take over. Are you guys expanding? How many students have you impacted so far? We're trying to do away with the word students. It just seems to have a little negative connotation in our places. But yeah, we are expanding. We are almost trying to figure out a statewide. So India has about 26, 28 states, and we will be setting up a large number of nukes in one state together with a corporate and a government and local communities. So we'll be setting up about 51 nukes. Yeah, children nukers. Yeah, we'll be setting up about 51 nukes. This is still not public yet. We're still finalizing the contracts, but I think, yeah, in the next 3.5 years, we're looking at around 51 nukes in one place, in one state, across 51 villages, and also in 3 cities in the same state. So we'll be in Punjab and doing quite a few setups of nukes. And there are many other standing projects that we also want to do. We have requests from Ghana, from Kenya, from South Africa, from Zimbabwe, and we would and from Greece. We would like to help these nukes also set up, and almost every month we get a request from here and there. Some places it's more feasible to do it, some it's not so easy to do it. Some places there's restrictions on them, on the funds that the people have. Actually, the best projects lack the most amount of funds, and we try to help them to raise it, but we are still, of course, limited by capacity. But yeah, we will be expanding, and but Project DEFY will remain small. The concept will reach a lot of people in a lot of places. Yes, that is going to happen, I hope. Okay, Lauren says, you spoke earlier about so many of us not getting the experience of great education. Totally agree. What do you think makes an education great? cannot say that for everybody. I think I can define that for myself, and I can say that, okay, this is great education for me. For example, if I get to make a lot of things and I have lots of technology and a lot of alone space and I can do things by myself and solve challenges, that is great education for me. For somebody else, that may be totally different. And actually, this was exactly the question that was asked while I was thinking about creating this entity project DEFY, and somebody asked, so how do you define great education? And honestly, I have no answer. I don't think I can. I can define it only for me, and just as I can do it for me, I will hope that others can do it for themselves, and that is the opportunity that they should get. And that's why DEFY actually stands for Design Education for Yourself, where people decide what is great education for them, not somebody else. But yeah. Is there any other questions? Actually, Nookers is a great name. Never thought of that. We still call them learners, though. Oh, by the way, if any of the innovators are around, okay, yeah. What do you want to happen with DEFY in the coming years? Well, it depends on how many years is called coming years. There's a reason why we called DEFY project DEFY, because projects end, and at some point we want DEFY to end as well. That at some point the world will not need DEFY to create NOOCs or to create self-learning spaces, and we can just finish up our work and do something else or be someone else. But I do feel that in the short term, in let's say the next 5 years, we're going to spend most of our time in trying to reach more and more communities, trying to help more and more people and communities set up their own NOOCs, and gather as much information about how people use them and how they make their decisions and how they make their choices at the NOOCs, and in that way prove that it is working far better than traditional learning systems, because people try to do the best for themselves. So I think that's what's going to happen in the next few years. We try to prove choice. Choice is the central concept to a NOOC, to DEFY. We feel that ultimately it all boils down to choice. The choice to learn and to do what people want to do, and not be restricted to what is allowed for them. So what could conventional schools learn from NOOCs? To be unconventional, maybe. The conventional schools are different in different places, but sort of the one tying factor of conventional schools is this political hierarchy, or just the control of power. The power goes something like from the top, someone in the government, the ministry, then comes down to the local government, then to the teachers, the headmasters, headmistresses, then to the teachers, and in all this mess, nobody really asks the students what they want to do. And I've attended countless conferences where experts have come and discussed what great education should be for children, and they're like, oh, we should do this for them and that for them, and I'm like, but hey, the answer is pretty simple. Just ask them, and maybe they'll let you know what they want. What they can learn is to ask the students, the learners, and base the education around them, and release some of that power. And of course, that also means you can release some of the responsibility. You are no longer, as a teacher or as a school, you are no longer required to ensure the success of a student. or the success of a learner, the learner will do that for himself or herself. Your role is comparatively lesser. You're participating in that person's learning, and just the same way that the learner is participating in your own. So basically, if the teachers and students are completely done away with, and everybody is just a learner, each learner with their own experiences and their own interests and their own goals that they want to achieve, and they help each other. If they can learn that, great. I mean, I'm really hoping that that can happen. It might take quite a few years in India for that to happen. It's still far behind. We're still not having those conversations yet in this country. We're still trying to fix the education system, make teachers more better and greater, and putting more and more pressure on teachers, whereas we still don't ask students what they want. And maybe we'll start doing that, and DEFY can be an example of it. All right, have I spoken too long? Okay, Freddie. Hi, Freddie. Do you incorporate the United Nations rights of child in your practice? No, we have not. We have not yet completely aligned them. We will be going through that actually now, and in fact, we are trying to create a template of policy that each NUC can adopt. What we do right now is come up with the rules, regulations, and sort of a working policy when we are on the ground with the community, and put it together, and then we put together a process that can challenge that policy as well. But what we are now working on is trying to create a template policy that that incorporates sort of standard the rights of children and of adults and of anybody who wants to learn, and especially because there's adults and children all learning together, there has to be there's a lot of things to consider, and we are putting together a template so that before even the community creates their own charter, they can use the template in the beginning, and then of course challenge them or question them and move ahead with it. Any other questions or anything else? Anything you want to say? It'll be great. Actually, I've spoken for about half an hour. Should we end? Yeah? Maybe it's a good time to finish this. All right. Okay, great. This was lovely. Thank you for asking so many questions. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to ask. Lauren says, it's been amazing to hear your experience and story. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lauren. You guys give me the opportunity to do it. And yeah, I would love to hear other people's stories as well. I'm kind of bored of my own. But yes, I will. Yes, I was just about to say, if anyone wants to reach out to us, I will put our email IDs into at the end of this video or in the comments, and then of course please feel free to reach out to us. We do need a lot of help. We are trying to do quite a lot of things, and as much help and collaboration as can come out be really amazing. We don't believe that we can do this alone, and actually we don't. Every NUC is a collaboration. We never set up a NUC just by ourselves, and we would love to collaborate with more people, help more people set up NUCs, learn from other people's practices, and hopefully keep developing our own concept going forward. So my Project DEFY is, you can find about it on projectdefy.org. I will put this also on the comments, and of course on the HundrED website. And my personal email or my email ID is abhijit@projectdefy.org. Please write to us, and it would be lovely to hear from you. Thank you so much. It's been fun, and looking forward to more interactions.